Our presenter tonight, we're happy to bring to you someone you may know, who is Father Canice, who hails from State College, Pennsylvania, and he's Catholic, and is going to present tonight on the Temperaments. And he'll tell you more about this, but we're blessed to have every year at our Abbey this group of missionaries that come, the Culture Project. And it's kind of through them and Father John Paul and Father Boniface that we have been exposed to this very interesting study. And it's a neat way to gain insight into your own personality. And Father Canice will talk more about that. So without further ado, welcome Father Canice.
First of all, welcome back, everyone. This is our first faith formation for the fall. We had a little break in the summer, but it's really, really nice to be back. And a special thank you if this is your first time coming to a faith formation event. It's truly good to have you here. We have a really good schedule coming up for the next few months. So please check the bulletin out for more details. But tonight I'm speaking about the temperament that God gave us. And I would like to start out with, I have a story. And it involves a horse. So there's a farmer who just built a new barn, but the barn door was too low, and every time the horse would come in, it would hit its head on the top of this door. So the farmer one day takes a saw and he begins to cut in a U shape a section out of the top of the door so that the horse would no longer bump its head. And as he was doing this, he had a friend who came up to him and said, "Well, why don't you just dig 6 inches lower into the ground?" And to that the farmer replied, "The legs aren't the problem, it's his head that's getting hit." People see things different ways, don't we? Sometimes we even miss the obvious. And we can even ask, well, how can two people who experience the same exact thing react in two very different ways? The difference in our reactions is what we call temperament. So what is a temperament? There are 4 types of temperaments, the choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, and melancholic. This is something that's actually fairly ancient. This was first proposed by ancient philosophers 350 BC. And ever since then, there's been spiritual authors, theologians, and psychologists who have been studying these temperaments and trying to gain insight into our human nature. All of us have a temperament. We probably have a primary temperament and a secondary temperament. Nobody has 100% of one type of temperament. We tend to be a mix of at least 2 temperaments. Temperaments are innate, so they're something that we are born with. They are not acquired. They are hardwired into us. This is our nature, not nurture. So temperament, it influences the way we react and how we process our environment and the circumstances around us. Really, the temperament is the sum of our natural preferences. That might be the best way to describe it, the sum of our natural preferences. So temperament, it is not meant to box you in or to rigidly categorize you in a certain box that you can't get out of. Like I said, it simply reveals our preference. So right now, I want everybody here, cross your arms. Okay, my natural preference is to cross my left arm over my right arm. Now, we're all capable of doing it the other way, right? It feels a little weird though, doesn't it? Try it. Yeah. We all have a natural preference. So we all have a natural preference, but again, we are capable of doing more than even what we naturally prefer. So our temperament, again, it's our natural preference of how we react and how we respond to things. Temperament, this is not an excuse just to justify all of our sinful flaws, right? That would be nice, but it's not. It's how we react to things. And actually, our temperament, this is different than our personality or character. So our personality is the product of our temperament after it undergoes our environment, our education, all of our thoughts, our ideas, our emotions, all of the free choices and habits that we acquire. So really, temperament is the raw material. And then whenever we take that raw material that God gave us, that's innate in us, and then we submit it to all of these things like environment and education, all of the nurture, we come up with our personality. So again, the temperament is the raw material, and our personality or our character is the product that comes out after it's been shaped. So why should we study the temperaments? Why even bother? So our temperament, first of all, it is a gift from God. Every temperament is good. It is a part of God's plan specifically for us and our holiness. We have been made in the image and likeness of God. God has made us lovingly, and we are all unique. So our temperament is part of the unique makeup that God has given us so that we can grow in holiness. So whenever we study the temperaments, these are kind of the key to, it helps at least a key to unlocking some of the mystery of who we are, and also understanding the mystery of our family and friends or our coworkers and really anybody else who's in our life. So temperament, studying them, we become aware of our natural strengths and weaknesses. We can always grow more in our strengths, and hopefully we can cut back some of our weaknesses. It helps us to better understand other people in our lives. It helps us to grow in our human maturation, to mature, to grow in the spiritual life, to become patient and loving with others. I already told a few people, I kind of imagined tonight as I described the temperaments, I feel like I'm going to see some spouses elbowing each other here tonight. So I'm on the lookout. So we can ask, what is my temperament? I know some of you may have taken the quiz already, but a quick way to figure out our temperament is we can say, well, how do we react to things? So if you get cut off in traffic, how do you react? If you get fired, how do you react? If you get an award and you're being praised, how do you react? How are you responding? Are you quick to express your anger? Do you go silent and shut down? Do you hold on to emotions, whether they're emotions of pain or joy, and you remember them vividly? Do you shrug things off and forget about them easily? These are all different ways that we can react and respond. So there's two factors whenever we talk about determining our temperament. Our reaction and actually the impression or the duration of the memory after that the stimulation happens. So first of all, what is our immediate reaction like whenever something happens to us from our environment? Is it a quick and a strong reaction, or is it a very slow and weak reaction? If I get cut off in traffic, am I yelling at the person, or I just figure, okay, it happens to everyone? The impression, is it a strong impression that lasts in our memory, and every time we think about it, we feel all of that reaction over and over and over again, that response, that initial response we have? Or is it just lasting for a short and faint amount of time of, you know what, I got cut off in traffic on my way to church and I've already forgotten about it? So reaction and the impression are two important factors in determining what our temperament is. So the quick and strong initial reaction that has a long and lasting memory or impression, that is the choleric. They're quick to respond and they don't forget. They remember it. The sanguine, initially they have a quick and a strong reaction to things, but then that impression kind of fades away very quickly. The melancholic, they have a slow and a weak reaction initially, but then it becomes a very strong, vivid impression as that stimulation continues to happen. And the phlegmatic have a very slow and weak reaction initially, and then they kind of forget about everything that happened soon afterwards. We're going to talk about each of these. Beginning with the choleric. Again, they're the ones, they respond to things very quickly, very strongly, and then the impression afterwards, it lasts. These are things that stick with them. So here's a snapshot of a choleric. They are the typical type A extroverted personality. They are fiercely independent, self-motivated, and strong-willed. They are highly ambitious and restless. They're enthusiastic, energetic, and driven. They're decisive. They have high ideals and they strive for greatness. They have a very keen intellect, and their ability to concentrate and focus on things is like, their endurance is incredible. Obstacles are not a burden for them. In fact, they like problems. They like whenever they're challenged because they want something to conquer. If a goal is hard to achieve or it takes a long time, because they have a strong will, they will endure to the end. Again, they're self-motivated, the classic go-getters. They thrive on activity and accomplishing tasks. They're very pragmatic and practical, not so much theoretical. They just want to do things all the time. They just do. They hate to waste time, especially in meetings. Like group meetings, that is not for a choleric. Drives them nuts. Work invigorates them. They like to work. They're not afraid to get their hands dirty. They don't let the grass grow under their feet. They value success and achievements. They like to succeed. They like to achieve things. They are extremely rational. They always have a good reason for what they do. They are not afraid of conflict or confrontation. They like the truth. If this is true, then it's true. Everybody else should just get over it, right? They love to argue and to debate. Perfect example of a choleric saint is St. Paul. And I love this. Get ready. So St. Paul, in Athens, he's walking around Athens. He's agitated. He sees idols everywhere. So he says he argued in the synagogue with the Jews and in the marketplace every day and with anyone else who happened to be there. He just liked to argue, right? Whenever St. Peter was not eating with the Gentiles, what did St. Paul say? When Peter came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he was clearly wrong. Right? This is a choleric, right? They're natural leaders. They're entrepreneurs, they're CEOs. They're good at grasping the big picture of things, and they communicate that vision very, very well. They're very good organizers. They create a lot of practical solutions. Father Jean-Luc and Father Joachim and I, we depend on a lot of good cholerics to help us run this parish, right? They love to be in charge, even if they don't have any experience or expertise in what they want to be in charge of. Here's a good example. Mother Angelica. She's intelligent, determined, and driven. She's task-oriented. She's a pragmatic leader. Failure is not an option. She founded EWTN with no experience in TV media. Whenever she needed to raise money, funds for her community, she came up with a very creative way. She knew that people in that area liked to fish, so she had an assembly line of sisters. They made fishing lures. They had the hooks, the feathers. They packaged it, and they sold them. They called them St. Peter's lures. This was so successful that Sports Illustrated did an article on her. Mother Angelica never fished a day of her life. That's just what cholerics do. They're very, very good at doing things. We're going to talk about the weak points of the cholerics. And I should say, again, so just, all of you out there, so hopefully if you're a choleric, you're not getting elbowed too hard. I should say that as we grow in holiness, as we mature, a lot of these weaknesses are things that we can overcome. Again, we're not boxed in to our temperament and the natural weaknesses we have. We probably have to work harder to overcome them if this is our temperament, but our fate is not sealed by our temperament and the weaknesses that we have. But if a choleric is not well formed, not growing in holiness, not seeking God, then here are some of the weaknesses that they have. Their impulse to act and achieve. Remember, they react quickly, right? They have an impulse to act and to achieve things very quickly. That leads to them being a little bit domineering, hard-headed, quick to anger. They're stubborn, demanding, and impatient. They make rushed, imprudent decisions because, remember, they just want to act. So they don't always take time to think things through. They just think, oh, here's the first solution that comes to my head. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to just believe that it's right and just be determined to make this happen. They sometimes can lack compassion, especially if somebody is getting in their way of achieving their goal. They'll bulldoze over you. They can view others as weak, unskilled, and slow. They can even show contempt by their belittling remarks. In fact, they can actually say something in a very calm tone and demeanor, but the way that they say it, it just goes to your heart and it stings, right? We've probably all experienced that. They're willing to sacrifice a relationship for the sake of achieving a goal. Again, they're the bulldozers. It's often said that cholerics, they have two heads but no heart. Again, this is the weak choleric. This is not anyone here. They have tunnel vision. They only see one road ahead, and it's their road that they have picked. If obstacles arise, because of their pride, it prevents them from actually consulting others or turning back. They continue stubbornly on their original course. They would rather dash their head against a wall before they notice the wide open door that's right next to them. Cholerics never look at the IKEA instruction manuals when they're assembling furniture. Sanguines. Again, their reaction, very strong and very quick. However, the impression after they have this big, strong reaction is very weak. They don't. It's not something that sticks with them for a long period of time. They're the classic people persons. Their joy is contagious. They're lively and carefree. They're extroverted and talkative. It's often said that they enter a room mouth first. They're very warm-hearted, compassionate, and optimistic. The world is brighter because of them. They're very good people to have in your lives. They make new friends very easily. They value relationships more than anything. Where the choleric is ready to sacrifice a relationship to achieve something, the sanguine, they focus on the relationship. They're social butterflies. They love to volunteer for many, many things. In high school, they will join every club that the school has. However, because they have faint impressions, they forget about all of the meetings and they never attend. However, sure enough, on picture day for the yearbook, they're in every picture in the yearbook, even though they weren't even in band. Somehow they get into that picture, right? So again, they have a quick response, but there's a weak impression. They're excellent at living in the present moment. They're very curious and imaginative, again, because they have that quick response, and their impression is kind of faint, so they're like, oh, here's something interesting. Oh, there's something interesting. It's kind of the squirrel brain at times, right? They have deep passions, and they wear their emotions on their sleeve. They can be a little bit impulsive at times. They can go from anger to love in the blink of an eye. In my mind, every sanguine is Italian. They're very good at forgiving because they don't remember. The impressions don't last. So if somebody offends them, it's a weak impression. They're very good at forgiving. They're actually very good at asking for forgiveness. That's what I said. Every time I think of sanguines, I think of Father Jean-Luc, I think of Father Cashin, and I think of Italians. Their extroversion, their outgoingness, makes them very sharp with their five senses. They're excellent with detail, and they often make really good artists because they're so focused outward on all of the stimulation that's around them. Again, they're quick to respond to things, but they like to respond to the things that are outside of them. They're the extroverts. They're external processors, so they speak a lot of words until they discover what they want to say. Perfect example of that is St. Peter. Think of the Transfiguration, where Jesus appears with Moses and Elijah, and he says, Peter wants to build 3 tents for him, but he does not know what he was saying. Peter, he just says things before he thinks. Peter sees Jesus. Here's another quick response, but without maybe sometimes thinking it through or having a faint impression. When Jesus is walking on the water, of course Peter says, call me out on the water. But then after he says that, all of a sudden his extroverted senses get very distracted. By what? By the water, by the wind, by the storm, of all of the things that are going out around him. So originally he saw Jesus, he was focused on that, but then again his senses got distracted, and he's quick to respond to those, so he took his eyes off Jesus and began to sink. So the weak points of the sanguine. They can tend towards superficiality. Like I said, they can easily get caught up in their 5 senses and the material world because they're quick to respond to all the stimulation outside of them and around them. Because of their weak impressions, they get bored with silence and reflection. They love being in the limelight and being the center of attention. They can easily get caught up in flattery, and then unfortunately, they can be influenced in negative ways by other people. They have an instability. Their moods and their convictions can change like the wind. Again, because they have that faint or weak, lasting impression, they can be very convicted about one thing one day and then feel the exact opposite about it the next. That can make them appear to be fickle. They can live in the moment to a fault, and they make bad choices, again, because they're quick to respond. They don't always think about future consequences. They are super optimistic, think everything's going to be rainbows and sunshine, and that everything's going to be okay, and they often don't think about the consequences. At times, they can offend others easily because, again, they are speaking before they think. They can be unreliable. They're quick to commit to things and be very excited about that, but they're ready to abandon ship whenever it gets hard. That original strong attraction that they had to do a task will quickly fade, and then they end up actually never really mastering anything. They get good at doing it. They're kind of a jack of all trades. They can do just about everything and anything to a certain degree because they're interested in everything, but they never master anything. Distractions often make them tardy. They're the ones who show up 15 late to a meeting, holding a Starbucks, telling you why they're late because they met somebody online that was really interesting. The melancholic. Well, so far, we're going through this actually at a pretty good pace. We've covered the choleric and the sanguine. Quick show of hands. If you've taken the test or you can identify yourself in these two temperaments so far, raise your hand if you don't mind. If you are, well, actually, cholerics won't mind. If you are a choleric. All right. Any sanguines? Sanguines won't mind either. Excellent. Okay. Very good. The melancholic. Their reaction is very slow and weak, but after repeated stimulation, the impression can be very strong and long-lasting. This is kind of a unique temperament. The reaction, I think it's like a fence post. You have a fence post, and as you hammer and drive it down into the ground with each repeated strike, the post goes deeper and deeper and deeper. At first, it's very surface level, but with the repeated stimulation, with the repeated striking, that fence post eventually becomes impossible to move. So melancholics, they have a memory of an elephant. They do not forget anything. They have an introverted nature, which lends to reflection. The sanguine and the choleric, again, they're the ones who focus on things that are outside of themselves. Remember, the choleric, he wants to do everything, get things done. The sanguine is distracted by all of the five senses and being a social butterfly. But the melancholic, he focuses on things that are inward. He's very sensitive and idealistic. He seeks truth and beauty and justice and anything that's noble. It's said that the melancholic longs for heaven so much that everything on earth just falls short. He is not satisfied with anything that's superficial. Many of the great writers and composers in history have been melancholics, and that combination of idealism and they actually have compassion for those who are suffering, it actually leads them to have leads them to have vocations that often to be very focused on serving others. Their introverted nature, it lends to reflection. They look at life from a very serious perspective. They always have a certain sadness at the core of their existence. This is not because they're like morbid or despairing, not per se, but they just have such a strong longing for the ultimate good that they just have a really hard time feeling satisfied with anything in the world. They feel like a stranger here below. They have great endurance when it comes to suffering. It's funny, they do not like to suffer, but whenever they have a cross that they accept, they will carry that cross in a heroic way. You can identify melancholic children very easily. They're very sensitive and have deep concerns about fairness. Parents, you have to be on your best behavior if you have a melancholic child, because they're going to call you out for any contradictions. In preschool, the melancholic child will ignore the sanguine teacher and all of her enthusiasm until she reads a story. And then whenever she sits down to read the story, the melancholic child will be all ears. The melancholic is often caught up in his own thought. He has a hard time starting tasks. Remember, he has a slow reaction to stimulation. He's a very inward-focused person. So starting a task, like the choleric would do, is actually really hard for the melancholic. But however, whenever they do get started, they're very good at persevering to the end. Remember, like I said, they have the heroic virtue to suffer very well. One joke is, well, how do you teach a melancholic to swim? If you just let it up to the melancholic to learn how to swim, they're going to think of all of the different kinds of strokes. They're going to ponder over all of the different techniques. They're going to worry about all of the dangers that can come along with swimming and drowning. If you really want to teach a melancholic how to swim, you just have to push him in the water. It's the only way to get it done. Example of a melancholic saint is St. John, the beloved disciple. He is a contemplative and a mystic. Remember, he laid his head on the heart of Jesus at the Last Supper. He seeks things that are above. He seeks Jesus. He compassionately remained at the foot of the cross with Mary. Again, the melancholics, they're prone to suffer themselves, but they have a heart that is very, very compassionate for others who are suffering. He had all of the mystical visions. Remember, like he goes into himself. He has these mystical visions, and he wrote. He's the author of Revelation. He has a great concern for the truth. Remember, the melancholics, they're concerned with all of these very high, lofty principles of truth, of justice, anything that's noble. And that's why he can write, "The truth will set you free." Another example of a melancholic saint is St. Padre Pio. He was very serious, devout, and pious as a child. He had a great concern for justice and truth. Even as a child, he once chastised a little neighbor girl because she was sewing on Sunday. He had an uncompromising attitude towards sin. He would pray and read in a field as a boy rather than play with his friends. What are the weaknesses of the melancholic? They get caught up in their high ideals, and often they can become critical and judgmental of others, of themselves and others. They often lack gratitude because they have high expectations. They just figure, this is the right thing to do, so everybody should just do it. Why are you upset about it? Why do you need thanked for it? Just do it because we're supposed to do it. They have a strong sense of scrupulosity at times. Again, this is the weaknesses of the melancholic that are natural to this temperament. They overthink to the point of paralyzing themselves from action. They just think things through and they never act. That can make them appear to be irresolute or indecisive. They miss opportunities because they have a struggle to act. They also have an ability, they make mountains out of molehills. They always see the worst and everything. The glass is half empty for the melancholic. They have a hard time inspiring others. If they want to get something done, they have a hard time inspiring others to join their projects because they are their reaction is so slow to be excited. They're just not easily enthusiastic. They can also become self-absorbed and given to pride. However, their pride is very interesting. The choleric, his pride is rooted in his desire to have honor and recognition, success and achievement. The pride of a melancholic is actually the opposite. His pride is rooted in his fear of humiliation and failure. Any melancholics here? Okay, very good. I think we've got about like a 25% temperament here, division for everyone. That's kind of cool. The phlegmatic, they have a very slow and weak reaction, and also their impression is very weak and faint and short as well. So they're the ones, if they get cut off in traffic, they might not even notice that they got cut off, and they're definitely not going to remember that they're mad at it. Sometimes you can a phlegmatic can watch a movie, and you can ask him what he liked about it, and he can't remember. It's because the impression is so weak and the reaction is so weak. However, because they have a slow reaction and the impression is not strong or immediate, they're very reserved, which makes them very prudent, orderly, and sensible. They are extremely well balanced, especially mentally and emotionally. They have a ton of common sense. If you need a solution to something, a common sense solution, ask a phlegmatic. They're very reflective and peaceful and respectful. They're dependable and patient. They're introverted. It's very interesting. They're introverted, but they value relationships. They are excellent listeners. They love peace and harmony. They hate conflict. They avoid conflict and confrontation at any cost. They are the stereotypical peacemakers. It's often said, if you hear somebody say, "What a great guy," it's probably a phlegmatic. Every family needs at least one, so parents, keep working until you get one, because they're the peacemakers in the family. It's good to have in your family. They're agreeable and likable. They're not easily insulted or provoked to anger. Again, they don't have those strong reactions or the lasting impressions, so you can insult a phlegmatic to his face, and he just kind of rolls it off really, really easily. They never need anger management classes. They do not want to be leaders. The phlegmatic, like this, the last thing a phlegmatic wants to do is be a leader, but whenever they do rise to the occasion, they are the servant leaders. The choleric, they are the natural leaders. They're the go-getters. They're very good at organizing. The phlegmatic does not want to be a leader, but whenever they do become a leader, they're very oriented towards serving the needs and the common good of everyone. They're very calm and collected. They excel in professions that require you to be cool under pressure. Again, because they don't have those strong immediate reactions. They can make really good firefighters or police officers or diplomats. These high-pressure situations that revolve an even keel or a calmness to be able to think straight. Their weak reaction to things actually makes them extremely objective. They're very suitable for scholarly work, whereas the sanguine and the choleric, they're going to have an opinion about everything, and their opinion is colored by their strong reaction to things. The phlegmatic does not have strong reactions, so the phlegmatic is actually really neutral and not biased, and it can be very objective. They are very clear and concise with their speech and their writing. Remember, the sanguine tries to speak until he figures out what he wants to say. The melancholic actually gets frustrated because he goes into himself and he thinks of such high ideals, and then he can never find the right words to express it. So he's always frustrated with his inability to express himself. And the choleric is just going to tell you what he thinks. He's very smart, so he's going to tell you very, very reasonably what he thinks in a very good order. They're not given to exaggeration. Again, they're not biased. Why would they try to exaggerate something? An example of a phlegmatic saint is St. Thomas Aquinas. He was very careful in his thought and speech. He was very methodical, very quiet, very even-tempered. Very simple, but very, very dry-witted. He had a really interesting sense of humor. There's one story that his friends tried to trick him once, and they said, "Thomas, look out the window, there's a cow flying." And he went over and he looked out the window, and of course all of his friends began to laugh at him, and he said, "I would rather believe that the cow is flying than that my friends would lie to me." Oh, doesn't that go to the core? He's a man of common sense. He's very logical, yet very trusting and innocent. It's said that his last confession was that of a 5-year-old child because it was so pure and simple. When he was interrupted by somebody else, he would politely apologize to the person who interrupted him. Phlegmatics are very agreeable people. They're very likable people. However, they also have weak points. They can come across, because they don't have those strong reactions, they can be perceived as being boring or apathetic. They're indecisive and passive. Again, like the melancholic, they don't act well because they're usually focused inwardly. They're also introverts, and they have a hard time acting on things outside of them. If you ask them, what do you want to eat? So if you're dating somebody or married to somebody, you ask them, well, what do you want to eat tonight? They're going to say, I don't care, you pick. They're lukewarm and passionless. They could be perceived this way. They procrastinate because they shy away from action. Again, it's not because they're necessarily lazy, but they can come across as lazy or sluggish or slow or unenthusiastic because they just have a really hard time starting things. They always seem to be content with keeping the status quo. Again, they're the peacemakers. They want harmony. If something is going to cause conflict, they don't want it. So we've covered, so I assume the rest of everyone here is a phlegmatic. Well, why don't you raise your hand anyway? Okay, very good. Here's a scenario that might explain each. Again, remember the temperaments, this is how we react and how we respond to different stimulation or circumstances around us. So imagine that there's a comet that's coming toward Earth and it hits the Earth. The sanguine would talk really excitedly to everyone about what he saw. He just wants to tell everybody what he saw. The choleric would form an expedition, a committee, to go and find the comet and analyze it. The melancholic, they're going to ponder what this means and how do I feel about it. The phlegmatic will wait to see what everyone else does and then he'll just go along with it. Okay. So now that we got a general glance at what each temperament is, and my guess is you're probably thinking of people in your lives. You're probably thinking of yourself. You're probably thinking of people that you know who fit into these temperaments. Now it's good for us to ask ourselves, well, now that I know this about these people, how do I react with them? How do I relate to them in a healthy way, knowing that this is their temperament? So understanding this, if we seek to do this, it will improve our communication skills. Actually, most people, this is funny, we just tend to presume that everyone else wants to communicate the same way that we want to. That they have the same preference that we do to figure out how we communicate with others. This is just not true. So certain styles of communication are more effective depending on what kind of temperament is. You're not going to relate to a choleric and a phlegmatic in the same way. If you try to, you're going to drive somebody nuts. Actually, I want 5 volunteers from each temperament. So let's start with the cholerics. Can I have 5 cholerics? 1. Where else? 2. 3. 4. 5. All right. Why don't you come up in this corner? Sanguines. 1. We're the sanguines. All of your hands should be up, sanguines. 2. 3. 4. 5. All right. Melancholics. Father Joachim. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. And phlegmatics. Do you remember that you're phlegmatic, right? 1, 2. Any other phlegmatics? 3. I knew that. What's that?
My wife might want to volunteer.
Is she?
She's behind the guy with the hat.
Okay. Is she phlegmatic?
Yeah.
All right. 4.
We have to let her
All right. Phlegmatics might only have 4. Any other phlegmatics? All right. So phlegmatic. So everybody. I don't know. I should have thought this more. We need you to find a space. Grab the sheet of paper that you have. Flip it over. You're going to need a pen or some kind of writing utensil. You got a couple? And here's what you're going to do. So, has everybody found the rest of the people in their group? So here is the assignment that we're going to give you 5 minutes for. On the back of a sheet of paper, I have more pens and stuff if you need them. You need to write a list of the things that you want to hear. What you want to hear people tell you. Whether it's your family members, friends, co-workers. What are the things that you like to hear? If you have a choleric in mind, somebody that you know who has this temperament and you want to relate to this person in a better way, here are some tips for relating to them. Acknowledge their achievements and contributions, even if they appear to be indifferent to receiving that compliment. Acknowledge it anyway. They like to achieve things and to contribute. Give them an opportunity to compete and to debate. Cholerics love a challenge. Just be sure to pick your battles, or else you're going to be arguing with them all the time. If you are going to share something with them, always provide reasons for why you think what you think. They want to know the reasons why. They want something to be rational. If they become too argumentative for your taste, tell them that, you have the ability to empathize with me even if you don't agree. That's a really good boundary to set with a choleric. Just tell them, all I want you to do is understand my position. If you don't agree, totally fine. Don't be a wet towel in all their initiative, or a wet blanket. We want them to initiate. Do not try to micromanage them. They will hate you. Help them to set good goals. They are going to set lots of goals, but remember, again, they act very quickly. Oftentimes they don't think about what they're doing before they act, so they need help setting good goals. Try not to take their arguments too personal, unless they become disrespectful. And then, like I said, it's good to set a boundary. So it's the choleric. Tips for relating to a sanguine. Affirm their enthusiasm and their optimistic nature. This is a sanguine penguin. When it's appropriate, enjoy the contagious joy that they create. Their joy is contagious. Let yourself experience it with them. Be willing to encourage them to seek the good whenever they are straying from the path, because they actually take loving correction very well. So whereas the choleric, if you tell the choleric he's wrong, is going to be offended and there's going to be a big argument that starts, don't be afraid to tell the sanguine. They might have an initial reaction, but they value the relationship and they value your opinion. And if they are on the wrong path, it's good to help them to get back on the right path. Accompany them through important tasks. They might have an initial zeal for a project, but it fades so fast. Help them to stay on schedule and to schedule their time wisely. Help them to plan short-term goals that will lead up to eventually them accomplishing the big-term goal that they have. They need to take their big-term goal. They're very good at having the big goal, but they need all of the small goals that are the stepping stones to get to that big goal. Be sure to reward them whenever they meet these little goals. Remember, sanguines, they like to focus on things that are outside of them. They like their senses. Actually, if you have a spouse that's a sanguine and they're having a bad day, just get them a good dinner. Like, that's all they need. Like, they like sensible things. Help them to reflect on positive outcomes that they have achieved through planning and discipline. So it's good for them. Remember, they can tend to be superficial at times. They need help reflecting on their success and connecting the dots of saying, oh, I was disciplined. I had a plan, I had a schedule, and I kept it, and I got a good result. They need that constant reminder. Help them to have noble ideas to pursue. Again, help to they could use help reflecting on a deeper level. When sanguines become friends with a melancholic or phlegmatic, they just think they're the deepest people in the world. They love talking to them because the melancholic and phlegmatic especially can bring them to a new depth that they don't often have on their own. Encourage them to develop good friendships, again, because they're easily attracted to bad ones. They're easily influenced by other people. Communicate often with them. Show them appreciation, especially for their humor, again, if appropriate. Sanguines tend to have a really good sense of humor. Show interest in their interests. Do not take away their fun or deprive them of a social life. They really need that. So again, if you have a sanguine spouse who's always going out and you're an introvert, you have to let them go out because they need that time. Do not scoff at their interests or punish them harshly or repressively. That is going to backfire. The melancholic. Allow them time for reflection. They need that alone time. Understand and affirm the concerns and the obstacles that they have tediously analyzed. So if you have the honor of a melancholic actually sharing his thoughts with you and all of the concerns that he has, be sure to show them that you actually listened to their concerns, that you pondered it with them, and that you analyzed it with them. So it's really good to listen. If a melancholic is sharing with you, turn on the listening ear. If you dismiss their concerns, they're going to think you're a fool, and they will feel very misunderstood. So if a melancholic is sharing with you, listen to them, or else they're going to think you're foolish and that you don't care, that you just don't understand. If you listen to them, they will be willing to listen to your optimism. So again, that's very beneficial. If you first listen to them and they feel understood, they will be open to hearing what you have to say. Take the first step. That's, again, they have a hard time initiating things, so helping them put a task into motion is a really good thing. Do not punish them for being shy, and never treat them harshly or unfairly. Remember, they are the ones who hold grudges. They don't forget. They're the fence post has been driven deep into the ground, so don't treat them unfairly because they will not forget. Don't outdo them in a negativity contest either. The phlegmatic. Praise them for their cooperation and good attitude and achievements. Affirm their desire for peace and order. You can affirm their convictions that they hold and encourage them to deepen and expand them. Remember, the phlegmatic oftentimes does not have many convictions because he does not have a quick reaction or a long-lasting impression. So it's hard for a phlegmatic to form deep convictions. But whenever they have them, you should encourage them. Encourage them to pursue long-term goals as well and help them get them kick-started. Encourage them to develop their social skills and leadership skills. Things to not do with the phlegmatic. Do not ridicule them or nag them or criticize them harshly. That will backfire. They feel overwhelmed and incapable. Be delicate when creating a sense of urgency. It's good. They need urgency, but you cannot just like spring it on them all at once. Do not take, especially the cholerics, you will be tempted just to be like, all right, phlegmatic, just go ahead and do whatever you're going to do. Let me take over from here. It will be easier for you to do that, but do not do that because they want you to do that, but it's not good for them. They need to learn how to create leadership skills and be task-oriented. So temperaments in the spiritual life. Again, remember that it's good for us to acknowledge our temperament, to acknowledge that God gave us our temperament, to acknowledge that God gave a temperament to others. It's good that we understand these things, but we have to see how this relates to our spiritual life and our relationship with God. So each temperament has a natural advantage or disadvantage in the spiritual life. If you're experiencing your disadvantages, don't be discouraged by that, because God supplies grace, and His grace perfects our nature. Don't worry about your nature not being good enough or dysfunctional. He gives grace that perfects our nature. If we become aware of our natural strengths and weaknesses through God's grace, we're more able to develop a plan to succeed and to triumph over those weaknesses. So the choleric in the spiritual life, these people, they're capable of being the greatest saints or the greatest sinners. They have an unrelenting pursuit of their goals. They just have to be the right goals, remember? And that's why St. Paul, remember when his goal was to persecute the Christians. That's a bad goal, right? And then he had his conversion and became the greatest of apostles. So they need to have the right goals. That's why they need to take time to reflect, to have the right goals. They're leaders, not followers. They need to learn how to follow Christ. A good spiritual director could really help a choleric, someone that they can go to, because a choleric is easily led astray by his own ambition. A spiritual director can help them to stay on track. The choleric is usually stubbornly attached to his own will, and it requires him to grow in humility. And I hate to say it, cholerics, the only way to grow in humility is humiliation. It's really hard for a choleric to go to the sacrament of confession, but it's a really, really, really good thing, especially for the choleric temperament. One of the things, rather than just saying this in every single temperament, staying close to the sacraments I mean, that's a given for every single temperament. We all need to stay close to the sacraments. They have to develop charity and love for others. They should meditate upon the mystical body of Christ, the church, and that all of the parts of the body are necessary and not only the head. Without fostering, they need to have an intentional prayer life, because they tend toward activism. They just want to do. So it's good for them to have a very intentional prayer life. Which, because they have a tendency to do things, they feel very distracted at times in prayer, but thank goodness they have such a strong will that they will persevere in prayer whenever they commit to it, even in dryness and aridity. We can encourage them to experience their emotions in their prayer life, praying from the heart and not just from their head. It's helpful to meditate upon, if you're a choleric, meditate upon the passion of Christ, to move your heart to have compassion, especially for those who are suffering. The sanguine spiritual life. Again, they have those faint impressions and strong reactions. Makes them very good at forgiving and asking for forgiveness. They're tempted to place too much trust in other people. Again, they're led astray very easily. So rather than trusting in other people, we need to have them develop such a strong relationship with Christ to put all of their trust in Him. And then especially to ask Christ to help them to develop the control of their strong emotions and passions. Routine is very helpful for a sanguine, because they rely on their senses and the external so much. We need to actually feed into that a little bit. So it's good if a sanguine is struggling to pray, ask them, what are the things that you like? Do you like going to a church that's beautiful, that has beautiful stained glass windows, that has incense, that has beautiful icons or whatever it might be, or statues? If you're a sanguine and you're trying to get a formed prayer life, create a little prayer nook in your home that has beautiful things that point us to God. Because if you're going to be distracted, at least be distracted by good things. We can encourage the sanguine to mortification of their senses. Remember, they like their senses. They like a good meal. They like the external. So fasting is a really, really good practice for a sanguine. Lectio Divina, like an Ignatian style of prayer, using their imagination. It's really good. Pray a passage from Scripture, and then use all of your imagination to envision yourself in that passage. What all of the things that are happening, what people are saying, what are the things that you see and smell and hear. Try to imagine what your senses would be like whenever you're in those circumstances. They should strive to go to a deeper place of silence and reflection. Prayer groups for accountability are really effective for sanguines. So if you're struggling to hold yourself accountable in your prayer life, sanguines, join a prayer group and have people hold you accountable. Obedience is actually fairly natural to a sanguine because they really aim to please. They're people pleasers. However, they have to strive to persevere in trials and suffering. Those are the times where they will turn away from being obedient. St. Peter in the agony of the garden. I mean, remember this. Right before the agony of the garden, the Last Supper, Peter's saying, Lord, I will die for you. And then 5 minutes later, he's denying Jesus 3 times. Obedience is good for sanguine. And they have to persevere in their suffering and not flee from suffering immediately. Having a good spiritual director is good. It's a good influence for them. The melancholic, they're naturally prayerful. They are the contemplatives by nature. They have compassionate hearts. They long for heaven. They have scrupulosity. They will review every mistake that they have ever made in their past, and this sometimes will lead them to despair in God's mercy. Spiritual directors can help them from going in that vicious cycle of anxiety and depression or frustration and scrupulosity. Praying the Psalms is really good for melancholics. The book of Psalms first of all, it's in Scripture, which means that the book of Psalms is inspired by God. And unlike every other book in Scripture, the book of Psalms is a book composed of only prayers. In fact, these are prayers that Jesus himself he not only prayed every day, he probably had all of the Psalms memorized by heart. And these are Psalms that are these prayers are very, very human. They talk about our anger. They talk about our joy. They talk about our sadness. There is a psalm for every single human emotion. So for a melancholic, the psalms really relate to them, and they resonate with them. So pray the psalms. The melancholic, they have such a strong desire to be perfect. However, they have to remember that they shouldn't be perfect for the sake of being perfect. They should be perfect for the sake of loving Christ and others. And a good spiritual director can help remind them of that. They should also meditate upon the passion of Christ, who died for their sins. Again, melancholics, they focus in a scrupulous way on their sinfulness. Jesus died for your sins. Pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet. Your motto should be, with God, all things are possible. Avoid self-pity and practice gratitude. The melancholic, like I said, does not often have gratitude at a very easy level. So they should be encouraged in prayer to very specifically pray for the things that they are thankful for. They should ponder a lot the blessings that they have in their life. This will help them to avoid the scrupulous cycle. The phlegmatic spiritual life. They value principles. They are true to their word. They like honesty and integrity. They're respectful for authority, and they love tradition. So actually, when it comes to the teachings of the church, even the difficult moral teachings, the phlegmatics just look at the hard teachings and they say, yep, I can get on board with that. But sometimes they can be tempted to compromise if they are under pressure from somebody they like. Remember, they value relationships. So if they're in a bad relationship, they might just compromise their values and go along with somebody else. Because the phlegmatic tends toward kind of a lazy slothfulness, they do not like keeping routines or difficult spiritual practices like self-mortification. So we should encourage them to do that. Phlegmatics also like structured prayer. They like the liturgy of the hours, praying the psalms. They like praying the rosary, Divine Mercy Chaplet. They really like sacramentals like the brown scapular, miraculous medal. They should be encouraged to participate in the life of a parish and not just sit back and observe. Regular prayer groups are also good to keep them accountable. All right, we'll come to our conclusion. It's good for us to know ourselves and begin to know God even more. Remember, we have been made in the image and likeness of God, all of us, and all of us have a unique temperament. Think of how amazing this is, that God formed us all in such a unique and loving way. Whenever we're attentive to the temperaments and the tendencies that people have and that we have, it actually brings us to a deeper relationship with the God who created these temperaments. And it's a very beautiful way to penetrate that great mystery of his love for us. And we should strive to use these temperaments and our knowledge of them to actually become more Christ-like. Somebody actually asked me before, somebody in the back over here, I forget how they phrased the question, but they said, is it possible to have all four temperaments? And the answer to that is actually yes. Well, actually, we do. We all have a primary temperament that cannot be changed, but we can develop characteristics and be formed and shaped in all of the temperament functionalities and their characteristics. And that's the ideal. Actually, there's only one person, we could say, who's ever had that. And in some ways, we could say he technically did not have a temperament because he was the perfection of all temperaments, and that's Jesus. Because he's fully integrated, fully human, fully divine, he did not have a temperament in the sense that we do. But our job is to take our temperament, that raw material, and to allow it to be formed by our efforts, but more importantly, and especially through God's grace, so that we can no longer succumb to our weaknesses, we can overcome them, and we can strive to develop all of the virtues associated with each temperament. So I hope this was helpful and enjoyable tonight, and I haven't taken a look. I want to do one more thing. Actually, Choleric, did I get your papers for the 5 choleric people? All right, here it is. All right. If you remember, I asked these little groups to tell me, what are the things that you want to hear from other people? I didn't do a good job of observing this. But I kind of imagine the scenario of all the cholerics. They got together, they cranked out their list in about 2 seconds. And they said, we want to hear, job well done. I like that idea. Thank you. You are awesome. Or even I will take care of that. They like to, cholerics can actually delegate well. Yes, I will be in charge. We know you are capable. Yes, you. You can handle that. You know, I got this idea actually. One of our monks, Father Boniface, who does this with the Culture Project that Father Jean-Luc mentioned. So he's done this a number of years, and he's observed this. One year he had the cholerics. He gave them this big piece of poster paper. They went up and they wrote in these big letters. They wrote all of these things. Then they even flipped it over after they were done. They finished it so quick of the things they wanted to hear. They flipped over the paper, and on the back they wrote, things I want to tell you. The melancholic. And again, this is what they want to hear from people. Number one, nothing. Dinner is ready. Take your time. I'll leave you alone. And I already made plans. I imagine the phlegmatic, their list is kind of short. I kind of bet they were just looking at the choleric and everyone else and just wondering what they were writing. The phlegmatic, kids, have a good day. I picked dinner out. That's good for a phlegmatic. You did a great job. I love you. Tell me what to do. It's really good. And the sanguines. The sanguines, I'm surprised there's not like smiley faces and stars and a map and the arrows drawn. It says family and friends to feel joyful when we're around, to bring family and friends around. They like appreciation. They confide problems and seek their input and decisions. They want to be included and wanted and needed and loved. That's very much a sanguine. So, good job, sanguines. All right. Well, any questions?
Does birth order have any influence on this?
No. Remember, the temperament it's innate. So a birth order is our environment, it's our circumstances. Our birth order is part of the things that help shape the raw material, but it is not the raw material. That's a really good question, though.
It's possible to have a sanguine and a choleric temperament.
Mm-hmm.
Like both of them.
Yeah, we can have multiple temperaments, so usually a primary and secondary. Mm-hmm. Okay, raise your hand if you think I'm choleric. Nobody thinks I'm choleric? I feel like I come across as pretty intimidating. Who thinks I'm sanguine? Sanguine penguin? No. Who thinks I am melancholic? Who thinks I'm phlegmatic? I feel like a lot of people didn't guess, so that's okay. I'm phlegmatic melancholic. Yeah. Hopefully a well-formed one. Any other questions? So we each have a temperament, but there are certain things that make it harder for us to determine what temperament we are. Sometimes it's like a childhood trauma or family experience. Sometimes people are just like lack of self-awareness. Habitual sin impacts our ability to know our temperament. But the greatest thing that actually makes it hard for us to know what temperament we are is holiness. So the greater you grow in holiness, people will actually wonder, what the heck are you? Any last questions? Nope. Excellent. Thank you.